Is Hamas on the verge of collapse? Have a look at this update on the humanitarian aid situation from Tamir Morag, senior political correspondent for Channel 14 Cable News here in Israel.
כרגע המשאיות ממשיכות להיכנס לרצועת עזה באותה שיטה שהכרנו מהפעם הקודמת, כאשר מאות משאיות נבזזו על ידי חמאס. צריך לומר שנראה שיש ירידה מסוימת באחוז המשאיות שנבזזות על ידי ארגון הטרור העזתי, מאחר שבצה"ל הפיקו לקחים ויודעים ללוות מרחוק באמצעות כטב"מים את המשאיות, ועדיין חלק לא מבוטל מהסיוע שנכנס לרצועה, אף על פי שמדובר בכמויות קטנות בהרבה מאלה שהיו במהלך הפסקת האש, מגיע לידיים של חמאס.
At the end of February, Israel closed off the Gaza Strip from all humanitarian aid. I laid this out in some earlier videos that vast quantities of aid were brought in January and February, and then Israel cut it all off. And the storehouses of aid are starting to run out under intense pressure from the Americans. But just last week, Israel started allowing humanitarian aid trucks to go into the northern part of the Gaza Strip where Hamas is still in control. And what you see here in this report from Tamir Morag is that the Israelis have put some mechanisms in place to be more effective at preventing Hamas from getting hold of the aid themselves. They've included drones that accompany the aid trucks. This allows them to track the aid, to see the Hamas people maybe coming out of their hiding places, and help the Israelis deal with the problem of Hamas seizing control of the aid. I laid this out extensively in my last few videos. Now, all of this is happening on the eve of Israel implementing its new system for the distribution of humanitarian aid. There will be 4 distribution centers, 3 of them in the southern part of the Gaza Strip by the Morag corridor, and 1 of them at the Netzarim corridor in the middle of the Gaza Strip. Aid will only be available to Gazans in these distribution centers. These are areas that are under full security control of Israel, of the IDF, and the distribution will be carried out by private American contractors who are working with the Israelis. And this will have the dual result of feeding the Gazan population, obviously. Also, it will deprive Hamas of its resources, both the resources from the aid itself, the money they make from the aid, and most importantly, it will deprive Hamas of their governing ability, not just because they don't have the resources for it, but because the people will be evacuating, moving into the humanitarian zones controlled by the Israelis, where they will get the aid. Hamas will simply lose the people they are governing. And just today, there is a report in Asharq al-Aswat, that is an Arabic language media outlet. They also publish in other languages, but in the Arabic Asharq al-Aswat, it's published in London, but it's owned and operated by the Saudis. It's owned by a member of the Saudi royal family. There's a report today that sources within Hamas say that there is an economic crisis happening within the organization as a result of Israel's renewed offensive. And sources within Hamas, I'm now quoting from the article in translation, sources within Hamas told Asharq al-Aswat that the organization has never been in such bad shape. They reported that there is great difficulty for Hamas in paying the salaries of its activists, of its employees. And they said that for the last 4 months, the government workers in Gaza have received only a small fraction of their salary, which has caused them to be extremely angry and displeased with Hamas, of course. In addition, they said that there is an administrative vacuum in the governance of Gaza because Hamas doesn't have people who can step into leadership roles anymore. You might remember from about a week and a half ago, the Israelis carried out airstrikes that killed most of what was remaining of the Hamas leadership, including the top authority in Hamas in Gaza, Muhammad Sinwar, the brother of the deceased Yahya Sinwar. He succeeded his brother, and Israel killed him about a week and a half ago in an airstrike. So Hamas is experiencing this crisis. Here we have a report in an Arab paper backed by the Saudis that Hamas is in crisis. They're going broke. They haven't been able to pay their employees. Their employees are not happy with them. And it specifically points out that they couldn't pay the civil servants in Gaza their salaries as a result of what the Israelis are doing. So here we see that the governing ability of Hamas in the Gaza Strip is in crisis right now, and this is only good news. But I bring up the fact that this was published by a Saudi-owned media outlet because of a report that we saw last week. Just a few days ago, Saudi Arabia and France issued a joint statement calling for the disarming of Hamas, completely disarming them. And according to one Saudi source quoted here, the objective is to transform the group into a purely political entity that can still play some role in future Palestinian governance. Put this into context. France, together with the United Kingdom and Canada, said about a week and a half ago that they were going to recognize a Palestinian state sometime in June. The Saudis have also called for progress towards a two-state solution as part of their normalization with Israel. And here you have the Saudis and the French putting out a joint statement saying that they want to disarm Hamas and transform Hamas into a purely political entity that can still play a role in the governance of Gaza. The only problem with this is that Hamas rejects this out of hand. A senior Hamas official, in an interview with Al Arabi Al Jadid newspaper, responded to the Saudi-French suggestion of disarming Hamas and said that that will never happen. According to what he said, it's not even up for discussion. Quote, "The resistance's weapons are a red line and is a matter completely closed with the agreement of all armed factions in the Gaza Strip, not just Hamas." In other words, it's a non-starter. Hamas will never disarm. And this, of course, makes sense because Hamas's entire raison d'etre, their entire reason they were founded, is to destroy the state of Israel. In fact, their founding charter calls for the death of all Jews in the world. That's right, not just the destruction of Israel, certainly not a two-state solution, but literally the death of all Jews. Genocide against the Jews is called for in the Hamas charter. In that charter, it quotes a Muslim text that says, "The day of judgment will not come about until Muslims fight the Jews. When the Jew will hide behind stones and trees, the stones and trees will say, 'O Muslims, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him.'" That's in Hamas's founding charter. So of course they're not going to give up their weapons. They're not going to agree to that. They have no reason for being if they don't have weapons with which to kill Jews. But we have to ask ourselves why this statement about Hamas's imminent economic collapse and how they can't pay their civil servants their salaries came out in a Saudi media outlet. Why didn't they put it out in one of their normal Palestinian media outlets, one of the usual Hamas media outlets that they use? Perhaps this was a cry for help to the Saudis, that if the Saudis want to transform them into a political entity, maybe they should help them pay their civil servants. Maybe that's what they're doing in this statement. There's also some speculation that Hamas is trying to signal that they're very weak and that they're not really a threat anymore, hoping that that could lead to pressure on Israel to back off of their offensive. Any way you look at it, Hamas is in crisis. Their leadership has been decimated. They are going broke fast. And even the recent shipments of humanitarian aid into areas they control, they're not able to seize control over them the way they once were. So they still are getting some supplies from it, but their control over the population is waning. You put the whole picture together, and it seems very likely that Hamas is on the verge of total collapse.